Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for showing up for Keystone Sessions. So this first panel that we're doing tonight is of particular interest to me personally as someone who's been an entrepreneur, someone who has been working on a project like Keystone for the last 4 years. And so I'm excited to have the panel here, have the group of experts that we have with us tonight to talk about this important topic. Additionally, I think one of the things, I've seen polls that have gone out to entrepreneurs lately about podcast topics, about different points of interest that they'd like information on. And one of the things that we hear most often is, we need to have more conversations about mental health. We need to have more conversations about some of the realities related to mental health. I want to start things off, and then I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves because I don't think I could do justice to introduce this group. But I want to start things off. I saw this recently, and I want to read this to you guys. And this was a study by the National Institute of Mental Health that said, it was done, I think, in 2020, 72% of entrepreneurs are directly or indirectly affected by mental health issues compared to just 48% of non-entrepreneurs. And then 49% of entrepreneurs deal with mental health issues directly, while only 32% of others experience them. And I think the other thing that I think is relatively common, it's a similarly 23% of entrepreneurs have family members who face these issues compared to just 16% of others with family members who face the same types of issues. So there's obviously there's some reason that entrepreneurs, and I don't think it's just the startup founders. I think honestly, it's people who probably work in the field in general or work in startups, run into some of these types of issues. So I want to explore some of the reasons why, some of the support that might be there, some of those other things. So I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves, and then I got a couple questions to kind of kick things off, and we'll see where things go from there. So Alicia, we'll start with you.
I'm Dr. Alicia Johnson, and I have a practice called AspireHealth. I work primarily actually with business owners and women who need help working on their diet, exercise, lifestyle, and different ways to take care of their body and their mental health so they can function at their highest level. So that sounds kind of simple, but I actually see really complex illness and complex mental health stuff with people that work too hard. And so it's a difficult thing for a lot of people to deal with. It's a difficult problem for a lot of people to navigate. And so I try to give people simple strategies to take care of their body, take care of their mind so they can function at their highest level.
Good evening. James Glenn. I wear a couple hats. I am the business strategist for University Health, which was also known as Truman Medical Center Behavioral Health. I've been in the mental health industry early as a practitioner, although I have not practiced, I say this proudly, for about 17 or 18 years. I am also an entrepreneur myself. So started a couple nonprofits, particularly in Wyandotte County. And then I have my own coaching consulting business now that I do nationwide. I do coaching and consulting for really people that are either starting a socially conscious business or have started one or many businesses and now want to do more socially conscious work. So that's kind of the area of expertise that I'm in.
Thank you for having me here, Kevin. I know this was super last minute. I didn't get to prep, but here we go. My name is Abraham, and I'm the co-founder. I'm the founder of the Freedom Project, and I've been in the mental health space for around 6 years now. But initially, I was, doing film and like marketing. I was burnt out, and I went to therapy for the first time, and I realized, oh my God, there's so much work that. So as a filmmaker and advertiser, I basically told myself I'm gonna go and basically talk about. Can you guys hear me? And like talk about mental health, but like using film and also storytelling at the same time, because I had a very rough past growing up. And so I'm basically trying to use my story to like highlight the importance of going to therapy right now. So I'm also passing legislation to make sure that, we're not just doing advocacy, but we're also, following through with action by, working with the politician to make sure that we have access to mental health services, especially minorities and just people in color, and also everybody else. So cool.
So, James, I want to start with you. I kind of did an informal survey of some entrepreneurs and was asking them, when you think about mental health as a startup founder or working in a startup, how would you describe the mental health challenges more specifically? Like, instead of just saying, there's mental health issues, and the feedback I got, there was a range of things. It was burnout, anxiety, insomnia, depression, this whole imposter syndrome conversation. What is it about entrepreneurs, in your experience in working with entrepreneurs, either on the business strategy side or your own experience as an entrepreneur? Why is this an issue for entrepreneurs? What is it that separates them? Why are the numbers so much higher?
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of it's not necessarily, my experience anyway, is not that it's always about them. Sometimes it's about the message that society is giving entrepreneurs. Hustle culture, for example. It's kind of part of the process, right? Well, working with people that have been in the business for 5 or 10 years, if you're still doing hustle culture at year 4 and year 5, it's become habitual. And you can't keep your foot on the gas of any car engine without it eventually blowing. So I think some of it is, what do people expect of me? And if I'm not working harder, faster, stronger, then I'm not growing. And at some point, usually in year 3 to 5, there needs to be a mind shift with most entrepreneurs. And it leads to kind of my second point, which is entrepreneurship no longer means solopreneurship. And so I think historically we think, I got to do it by myself. And we, particularly since the pandemic, I think we've realized how important having other people around and networks are. Because we really are pack animals, and we need other people to kind of keep us in check, to be anchors for us in our life. And we're usually the last to know when something's going awry, especially, by the way, if it's going good. So if your energy is going good and you keep growing and growing, you're at a higher risk of hitting that burnout if you don't have some good kind of self-care in place and habits around you. So my experience has been really that it's the lifestyle that we tend to it got us maybe to the first win or the second win, and then we think that's the only way to get to the next one. And unless you're around other seasoned entrepreneurs, you don't always know that there's a third option and a fourth option and a fifth option, if that makes sense. So some of it's about our mindset and what have we adopted as habits.
So you bring up an interesting point around, kind of the perception of being an entrepreneur and how that might be how this gets perpetuated a little bit, especially if it's a filter that the entrepreneur sees themselves through. Abraham, I think some of the work you're doing, first of all, describe your project to us. Let's talk about the Freedom Project a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for that. I always forget to actually explain what the Freedom Project is, and knowing that it's taken me 6 years. But yeah, so the Freedom Project, it's basically a media company now where, the sole purpose is to talk about mental health. So just picture it, a CNN where all we talk about is mental health, but not just like advocacy. We're also pushing legislation. We're actually producing films and making sure that they're being seen. So I use my background, as a developer and a filmmaker to be able to do all of these things with the help of, team members that I have right now. So Zeke is one of the people that's been helping as well.
And so some of the focus that I've seen has been around
Bing.
Some of the focus has been around athletes.
Yeah.
And maybe the pressure that athletes are under. It seems like there's maybe a parallel between that expectation of performance, that expectation of constantly hitting the next, milestone, the next achievement as an athlete. There might be some parallels between what an entrepreneur goes through and what an athlete goes through from that same perspective. Is that kind of your experience or what you've seen?
Yeah, big time. Because my background, back when I was a lot younger, I was an athlete. So I was playing soccer. I was a Puma athlete, and the goal was for me to go to Norway and actually try out. But I was very competitive, but I ended up, watching one of my friends die in front of me. So that kind of messed me up for a long time. But my environment did not, give me that space to actually, deal with, losing someone at such a young age. But I wanted to compete, but I didn't have the resources to compete. So I was completely burned out at a very young age. So that stress also manifested into a stutter, which was super weird. So I had a really bad stutter until 7 years ago, where I'll have to do do this just to talk. I almost stuttered again. Wow. Okay, we do need more therapy now. But yeah, so like I was completely burned out, at a very young age, but I didn't have the resources or anyone to tell me what was wrong with me. So now that's why I built the Freedom Project in order to be that company that it's like talking about all of these ways that people can be experiencing mental illnesses, but they are not even aware. And that's something that I see every day, and especially as a dad now, I'm constantly talking to my son now, which is somehow he's using that against me. He's too smart. But yeah, so I feel like I'm going off topic now. But
Yeah, you got to be careful with the kids, man. They'll teach you a lot for sure.
Especially as a new dad.
Alicia, so this idea of pushing yourself too far, the physiological aspects of the impact that pushing your body too hard can have on your mental capacity or your mental health. Talk a little bit about your experience and what you've seen there. I met you through Pipeline Entrepreneurs, so you've done a lot of this work, I think, with entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial founders. So what is this idea behind your body actually pushing your mental well-being into a bad place?
Well, one of the things that people generally do, and of course I was guilty of this going through school and working too hard, is thinking that caffeine is a replacement for sleep and we don't ever need to rest and we don't ever need to take a break, and I'm tough, so I'll keep pushing through. And one thing that I think is really interesting is if you look at a scan of a stressed brain, a brain that's exposed to a high level of cortisol, you can't differentiate that brain between an Alzheimer's brain. You have the same level of cortical atrophy in an extremely stressed brain as you do in somebody with dementia. So you stop and think about that and think, okay, am I at my highest level of performance if I'm working so hard that I basically have a low-grade dementia? That's something that I see people doing a lot. They're stressing their bodies to the point where, in my area of expertise, my language is the endocrine system. Stress hormones, female hormones, leptin, which is like our hunger hormone, insulin, blood sugar balance. Like what do all of our chemicals tell us is happening to our bodies? And what happens when we push ourselves too hard is our estrogen and progesterone go down. So we get irritable and agitated. Our testosterone goes down. So you lose muscle mass and you don't sleep as well, and your focus isn't as good. You don't sleep enough, so your insulin goes up, and now your blood sugar is swinging all over the place and you're anxious and spacey. You don't sleep enough, so your leptin goes up. And so anyone pulled an all-nighter and the next day you had to eat like 5 times as much food the next day because you were so hungry, that's because the ratio of your hunger fullness hormones will flip-flop they'll change by like 80%. So little things that we do to push our bodies too hard have a dramatic impact on our systems. We'll see blood sugar levels, hypertension, we'll see concentration levels, we'll see people functioning at a level like they're drunk from getting 5 hours of sleep. We'll see massive physiologic changes from one day of mistreating your body. And, I'm an entrepreneur. I went to school for 11 years. I did all the things you're not supposed to do and beat myself up in every way. So I'm not sitting up here saying we should all just know, how to do it perfectly. But we have to try, because we break down our bodies, and then the mind that's supposed to be running your business is not going to work as well, because it is not getting the right blood sugar. It's not getting the right stress hormone levels. You're not able to focus as much. So, I think that the way we push ourselves has a tremendous impact on our health and ultimately our ability to run our business. So it does turn out to be important, even though we try to put our health last. Don't let me start my TED talk on this. So this is something that this has been my passion for a good part of my life. So I grew up with a mentally ill brother who took every pill that existed. And I saw what that looked like. I saw what the system looked like and how we treated people with mental illness. And even as a kid, I was like, this doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like it's working. And the thing is, I see people for mental health issues every single day. So every day people come into me with a mental health problem. And it is extremely rare that I see a person where I actually believe that there's something wrong with their brain. Most of the time, I think that there's something wrong with their endocrine system. Their insulin is off, their testosterone is off, their leptin is off, their cortisol is off, and it's testable. Insurance pays for it. It's insane. And you know what is crazy is that this is not taught in medical school. And it's in my, sorry, I said I was going to get on my TED Talk. It's inequity, especially with women, because we're affected by it more because our systems are more disrupted, but you're certainly affected by it too. And your doctors should be taught, and they shouldn't be doing what I did, which is sit up late at night reading articles in PubMed, trying to learn about how all of this stuff works, because they don't teach about it. We should learn about how these things work in school, and we don't. You go into your doctor and you say, I feel sad and mad, and they're like, here's a pill. And sometimes it works. I'm not saying the pills are bad, but a lot of times we're not getting to the root of why our mental health is so disrupted, because our physiology is so disrupted by the way we live. And why don't they do it? They don't know. And why don't they know? It's not part of the program at all. At all. They don't even know how to read. And this isn't a criticism. It's not their fault. But if you give them that lab panel, they won't know how to read it because they're not taught. And they're good at a lot of things. It's just, unfortunately, it's a part of our system that we think doesn't matter. It's a subjective experience. Like, oh, you feel sad and irritable and you can't sleep and you're tired and cranky and you feel like your life is hopeless and you're exhausted or whatever. That's fine. Do you want a blood pressure pill? And it's not the fault of the doctor. It's just that they were never taught.
James, I want to, you'd said something earlier about, perception, and I think you even used the word stigma. So I do want to talk a little bit about the stigma, especially from an entrepreneurial perspective. Entrepreneurs notoriously don't ask for help. They're busy fundraising, they're busy building product, building company, and they're the last one to ask. It's kind of my father was a physician. He was the last one who would go see a doctor, right? Why is that? Why do people that have mental, and not even entrepreneurs, but the people who have mental health issues or suffer from depression, why are they oftentimes the last ones? And what is with this stigma we've created where these people, where they feel like they're going to be looked upon differently if they ask for that help?
Well, I mean, it's a loaded question. The truth is they have been historically. So the reason it is we've all probably, if you really think about it, you've had experiences where people have felt outcasted because their symptoms have got out of control. And deep inside, you don't want to feel like that. I think when you're an entrepreneur, some of that, your perception, especially when you're building your brand, you're very conscious of it. I don't want a funder or an investor to doubt my ability to manage money or execute my dream. So I'm not going to be vulnerable like that. My experience, on the other hand, particularly what I was talking to you about with stigma, is particularly over the last, since COVID, this could be the upside of COVID, is we are now seeing many more people talk openly about the struggle with mental health challenges. And what that does is then it makes you feel less isolated, and you recognize, oh, that entrepreneur did that, or that athlete did that, which is why I think what you're doing is really cool, and you look cool dressed up like that today, I have to tell you. I think it's important to have the conversations. And in the mental health field, I've been doing this for 30 years. Kind of running joke right now is, how strong is stigma? Is it going to be coming back like it was before? Are we going to just make this part of our past? I think entrepreneurs, I think there is a tie. I think there's been some research done. I don't know it, but I've seen it over the course of my career with creativity and, kind of the demons that come with creativity. So I think a lot of people suffer in silence when that comes to that. We were talking about kids and how highly intellectual kids, but they may be low on socioeconomic kind of scales. You have to have some time to catch up. Well, a lot of those kids, if they're that intellectually stimulated or that creative or that artistic, it's hard fitting in with your peers, and you're starting to feel, before you can vocalize, you're starting to feel outcasted. So why would I give you another reason for that to happen? So the more people that can tell their story, there's power amongst us, and the more people that can be successful and tell their story opens up a whole room of possibility for us to be able to even avoid treatment or have a different conversation or seek someone else other than a psychiatrist to be able to get the help that we need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. Abraham, I think you guys have run some pre-campaign, like In the Stigma. That's a pre-campaign kind of piece that you did. Talk a little bit about In the Stigma.
Yeah. So the reason why we've been running that, at least in my experience, most of the entrepreneurs that I work with, and myself at that too, we always identify with the things that we are doing, and but also on the other side, we're the only one who know that we don't have enough resources. So now we're burnt out, but then at the same time, we feel like we're failing. So I try to talk about all of the little things that are going on during my day-to-day, because I believe, that's the only way that we can actually basically help more people to come out and talk about the aspect of entrepreneurship that most people don't see. But we're in it every day, we're dealing with it every day. And to me, the reason why I've been dressed a certain way, thank you for the compliment, by the way, it's because whenever I go to a place, it takes me forever to even meet the decision makers. And, I have to do certain things to be able to just, show people that I know what I'm doing. So that also adds up to the burnout that, we are talking about right now, because I'm not only thinking about getting the deal, I'm thinking about, okay, are they even going to trust me in the first place? So I intentionally dress a certain way, to make sure that I am not put into a category, but also people actually take me seriously. So that also adds some more stress, which, I have a 4-year-old that makes it easier. Before I leave the house, he would tell me that I love you. So I think that helps a little bit. So yeah, but just to answer your question, stigma is very high, not just in the the entrepreneur stage, but as a Black man, my family till today, they don't support the Freedom Project. And every day, I get emails from random people, Black, white, it doesn't matter where they come from. They're telling me directly their story. Sometimes I'll wake up and just open the Freedom Project email, and then I will see stories upon stories of people just letting me know the deepest, darkest desires. Sometimes, they're pretty weird, but I'm just honored that people are opening it up and actually sharing the things that they are dealing with. So I'm hoping that, the Freedom Project, and with all the campaigns that we're doing, the goal is to be able to help people come out and speak up.
Personally, I think that's really important. So we always talk about, things are being normalized in society that we don't want to see normalized. Yeah. And we won't get into what those are. But for me, this is one of those things where we absolutely need to get to the point where it's okay to be able to talk about this. So I recently had a conversation with a group of entrepreneurs where I shared some of my lived experiences with depression and some of the things that I've gone through, or the feelings I have. And imposter syndrome is absolutely one of these things. And James, I think you touched on it, which is I don't want funders, I don't want potential partners to know, because I'm worried that they're going to think I'm not able to do my job, or I can't be trusted with their money, or and that we have to stop that. We have to stop that dialogue. And I assume that's probably the case, not just with entrepreneurs, but across the board with people that you've treated or people that you talk to on a regular basis.
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to say there. So one is, I applaud you for telling your story, because I think you'll know about this more than I do, but I know from working in the inner city for 25 years, I think culturally, some cultures also, it's not just shame that you feel from telling your story, it's the shame that the family feels from you telling your story, or what are you doing to our family? And so there's this whole level of additional stress, I think, in doing that. And one of the reasons I point that out is I think a lot of people don't do this, and this is part of why coaching is so helpful for so many people, is a lot of people don't know how to tell their story from a position of power. They tell it from a position of victimhood, and then it gives this perception that you're trying to not let people see when you tell your story. And I think that's super important to reach out and get people in your life that can help you tell your story from a position of power and success. And one of my favorite sayings is your story can be your power or it can be your pain. You get to decide. You get to decide. Well, if we're creative enough to get a business started and do this stuff, you also get to decide what the story is in your life. And the more you tell it, the better you get at it. And this country loves underdogs. They love them. So use it to your advantage, but you have to be taught, you have to practice, you have to look at your own life differently. And if you're still in pain and you're still healing from certain things, it's really hard to do. So it's a process. Recognize it's a process. The other thing that I'm really big on in my coaching business, but frankly in behavioral health too, is I'm not a fan of labels at all and the language we use. So when you just said imposter syndrome, that's one of the things that we usually eliminate in coaching. Failure. What would your life look like if you had no failure, if you just learned from every mistake that you did? What would it look like if you just eliminated that word and you started describing the feeling you have differently? And when you start using different language in your head, you will shift from victimhood to that position of power, and you start seeing things differently. And that's really important. So I don't, at behavioral health, I do this at Truman all the time. You'll hear the term frequent flyer for people that have chronic illnesses and end up in our ER consistently. And we immediately stop conversations and say, they're actually loyal customers. They're coming back to you because you served them well sometime, or you may be the only one serving them, or they didn't get what they need. So what happens if every frequent flyer was a loyal customer? How do you think the doctor's going to react? How do you think the nurse is going to react when you start labeling them differently? So labels and kind of the language you use, what you put behind the words I am. I know it sounds like, something on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday, but truthfully, it is really powerful in terms of shifting whether or not you have that possibility and working through let's say you are battling depression and your father's had depression, it was recurring. That doesn't mean that your depression is going to be recurring. You get the possibility of surrounding yourself with different protective factors than your father did. But somebody needs to help you shift your thinking to be able to do that differently. Does that make sense? So those are just kind of some practical points you can use. And when you start paying attention to some of the words and the labels you use, your mind and your thoughts then shift and you can act differently. So keep telling your story, brother. It'll get out.
If I could put a bullet in two phrases I hear in the startup community the most, one is celebrate failure. That's not the goal. The goal is not to celebrate failure. The goal is to ensure that we're learning from our mistakes and we're progressing and moving forward from those learnings. The other one is hustle culture. That's another one of these things where I think we try to glorify people who work, and do things to their body and to their mind and to their families. We try to glorify that by using the phrase, hustle culture. And so those are two things I would shoot at immediately if we could do that. I'm going to flip now to talk about what we can do about this. I want to talk a little bit about, we talk about access to services, access to resources, those types of things. Alicia, I want to start with you because I've heard you talk to entrepreneurs about what they should be doing, recognizing with themselves and what they should be doing just physically to improve their situation. So talk a little bit about some of the coaching that you give to founders and to entrepreneurs.
So with the actual physical health part, the basic goal that I tell everyone, that I try to hammer into everyone's minds, is if you could do one thing for your body to balance your endocrine system and make it healthier so that you feel more normal, it would be to try to consume about 120 carbohydrates a day, divided into 4 portions, 30 grams of carbohydrates at a time. Just keeping your blood sugar balanced can make the rest of your endocrine system stabilize. And so health-wise, I think that's probably, if you just take that one little thing away and say, okay, my stress management system would work better, my thyroid would work better, my male and female hormones would work better, my sleep would work better. If you can just do one thing, just try that for 3 weeks and see what happens. But I do take a very holistic approach and think a lot more about brain chemistry when I'm thinking about a business owner. So I think that we all know we should eat better. We all know we should sleep better. We all know we should exercise better. We all know that we should make different choices. So the reason that we don't do that a lot of times is that our brain chemistry feels a little off and it's hard to make good choices. So for example, when your serotonin is low, you can feel very compulsive. Compulsive means there's ice cream in the fridge. There's ice cream in the fridge. So that you think about the same thing over and over until you do it, and it's hard to keep from doing that. When your dopamine is low, you're impulsive. So you're like, oh, just ate so much ice cream, never gonna eat it again. And you walk by the table, oh, a cookie, and eat. And so impulsive choices are from low dopamine. A lot of entrepreneurs, the reason that you're so good at doing what you do is because you have a drive for more dopamine. You have a drive for more of those feel good chemicals. You really want them. So you're seeking them a lot. And there are healthy ways to seek those chemicals and unhealthy ways to seek those chemicals. So a couple of basic things. We bring up serotonin naturally in ourselves and in others when we express to one another why we matter. So if we tell each other why we matter, if I tell you you're fundraising for people who need help in mental health services, and that makes a big difference to a lot of families, and you probably change a whole lot of lives, that makes me feel good to be able to say that to you. And I hope that feels good to know that you do it. When somebody knows why they matter in a room, their serotonin will go up. When we talk about our goals with someone else, when we say, I'm going to tell my story and I'm going to reduce stigma and I'm going to make it easier for people who come after me. And that's like, I'm working really hard at it and I'm going to do this. When you tell people that, your dopamine goes up, but their dopamine goes up too. And so I believe that when we work with other people, if we create a culture of expressing why you matter and what I'm trying to do with my world, and I want to hear what you're trying to do with your world, instead of gossip and complaining and all of that stuff, if we focus on bringing up our serotonin, our dopamine, we're less impulsive, we're less compulsive, and we just make better choices. And the last thing I'm going to say, hugging your 4-year-old, one of the fastest ways to stabilize serotonin and dopamine is oxytocin. So spending time with the people that you love and bonding has a natural balancing effect on serotonin and dopamine. And just a minimum amount of like giving hugs, bonding, relating, those things actually stabilize our behavioral chemistry. And I think that comes before the food choices, because if you're not suffering so much, you do better things for yourself. So I can tell you how to eat 120 carbs, but really like tell people why they matter, ask people what their passion is, and give some hugs. But like, I think those are the starting points for a business owner. And if you create that culture within, I mean, don't always hug in your office, but create that culture in your office of that being the environment, set the example. I think you set a better mental health example, and it's more important than the food program that we implement.
I was going to start a t-shirt campaign, Hug an Entrepreneur. It sounded like such a good idea to me. We always talk about isolation, and you touched a little bit, like one of the upsides of the pandemic has been, I think people realize what isolation does versus it just kind of being an underlying thing, especially entrepreneurs. It's oftentimes a lonely journey. We always talk a little bit about your coaching, so what can people do? Like, instead of talking about kind of how we recognize it, why it happens, how do you get people past that?
Let me give 3 practical. So I have a chapter in this book I'm writing, so I'm going to try to remember. But let me give you 3 practical things you can walk out of here and do today. Okay, let's do that. So I don't forget them. 1 is don't do it alone. 2 is fridge and phone, and 3 is airplanes, planes, trains, and automobiles. Okay. So if I forget it, remind me what I just said. Okay, 1 is don't do things alone. Big misconception we already covered. I like a lot of what you said in terms of hugs. And I was a hugger before COVID. It's very awkward for people that were huggers before COVID going through COVID, because then you can't hug people, right? And I realized how much dopamine hits I was getting out of those hugs. But there is a lot of alternatives for entrepreneurs now, and that really didn't exist pre-COVID. So I host advice circles, for example. So I have people around the country that get together once a month just to share advice in how to run their business. What's their biggest problem? What do we need to handle now? I've been carrying this for far too long. I don't want to carry it anymore. Getting that from each other and removing that stress is huge for people to break through and have big moments. Get coaching. Sign up for, go to a therapist, get together with a small group of friends that are entrepreneurial thinkers. Make time, and the sad part is it is intentional. You know, we used to think we could just passively keep friendships. The truth of the matter is most close friendships die after 7 years if you don't build them in your life. So you have to build people in your life. And if you're already building strategy, make it line up with whatever your business strategy is. Who are the other people you can bring along with you that are going to fill your cup? Because your A game will be there, you know, much more at what you're doing. Does that make sense? So that's one. And there's a number of things. I'll be glad to talk to you afterwards and get you hooked up with people if that's what you want to do. Second, I just heard this, and it's my new favorite analogy. Treat your phone and your fridge the same way. We can all have healthy things in our fridge, fruits and vegetables, and we can all have processed foods. It's the same way with your phone. We can have healthy things on our phone, the Calm app, Headspace, podcasts that are feeding our creativity side, and we can have processed foods. And if you're spending time on social media, especially if it's part of your business, if you're spending too much time on it, you're going to get the side effects and you're going to be sick in the long run. That's the bottom line, just like eating processed foods. We don't let our kids stand there with the door open deciding what they're going to, you know, eat. Those of you that have teenagers will know the damn door starts pinging you after a while, like, Jesus, just make a damn decision, you know. And the truth is your phone's the same way. It's set up to do that for you. You have to set boundaries and decide, set the timer on your phone. Do it only when you know somebody's going to kind of interrupt you in 15 minutes. I start meetings at the office, by the way, at 15 minutes after the hour. So I only do 45-minute meetings. And that has been a lifesaver for me in terms of being on Zoom back to back. So then I can go have a 15-minute pause before I do anything, right? So decide with media, you know, what is are you going to eat fruits and vegetables today, or are you going to be eating processed foods, kind of like you were talking about with where you're going? And the third thing is, this is kind of a formula I put together for a lot of entrepreneurs, is think in terms of plane, trains, and automobiles. Most entrepreneurs ramp up right away from the time they wake up. We don't build planes without building runways. You need runway time when you wake up, and you need runway time when you go to bed. You need to decompress. Otherwise, you're pulling all that energy into bed, which disrupts our sleep. And the number one complaint I get, I don't know if you get this, is I can't get my thoughts to stop. I can't get my thoughts to stop. Well, that's because you're still running your damn engine at 10 o'clock at night and you haven't ramped down. So start thinking in terms of a runway. It looks like this for me. I get up 5:30. I put my workout clothes on right away so I don't argue with myself on whether I'm going to the gym. I read, I do my gratitudes, I do my number one thing, and I'm out the door. I haven't even looked at my computer. So I do that 5 to 6 days a week. It's automated. I don't ever think about it. And my day, 90% of the time, if you can control it by 10 a.m., then the rest of your day will be smooth for us. I don't know why that is. I have no idea what the research says around it, except it tends to work. So think in terms of a plane. How are you setting up your ramp to ramp up your day and ramp down your day? Trains. Train conductors are notorious for having good schedules, and they follow them. And I think one of the traps entrepreneurs get in is they don't have a planned schedule that's outlined for someone else. We need some structure in our life. So think in terms of structure. What are you building in for yourself and your company? And does that structure include other people? And run it like a damn train conductor. So if you're going to do 45-minute meetings, apologize to people and be done in 45 minutes. If you're going to have lunch because you need a break and you need to give your mind that time to be able to prepare for your afternoon meetings. Decide you're going to do it and do it. So think like a train conductor with schedules. And the last one's automobiles. So how do you turn a car or a boat? You put it in motion. You have to move. So act your way into thinking and feeling differently. So what do you need to do to remove a barrier to get up and do a damn walk? Or if you got to do a meeting, maybe you should go walk and do the meeting. Think creatively. That's what you get paid to do. If you're an entrepreneur, you're creative. give yourself permission to try something different and prioritize movement. So then you won't be as hard on yourself, and you will come home and have energy with the ones that you love, and you won't be zapped out. Those 3 things, if you just start practicing them today, just pick one. When you walk out of here, I guarantee you in a week or 2, you'll start feeling better. So I don't know why that is, but that tends to work for most people. Does that make sense? Questions about that?
Makes total sense. Makes total sense. No, I think everybody's writing it down. Abraham, so resources, things you've, throughout your, the making of the Freedom Project, or, your personal experiences, what are those things you've done, or those things you've seen others do or heard about, the types of resources they use or the types of things they do to benefit themselves?
So with me, I'm gonna go back a little bit. So there's 2 parts to it. One is a personal story. The other one is a longevity type of plan. But on a personal side, 4 years ago now, I had Bell palsy. And if you don't know what Bell palsy is where half of your body half of your face just doesn't work anymore. So your eyes just stay open and your mouth just kind of like drools because, the doctor explained it, but I don't remember all the doctor stuff. After experiencing that, I realized that I was overworking myself. I was doing like 10 million things at the same time, and I just made a decision to myself, which is, I'm gonna make sure that I have boundaries with my creation, because I did not have boundaries with everything that I was doing. I was, basically identifying myself as the creator of Freedom Project, the developer, blah blah blah. So I was doing all of these things because I had to do it. And the fact that there was not any resources available for me, because I was the one doing the sales, I was the project manager, I was the CEO, I was literally doing every aspect of the business. So, eventually the body keeps the score, and then half of my face was paralyzed. And me realizing that I have a 4-year-old that's always going to be there until he's 18, I hope. But yeah, so I just made the personal decision to take care of my mental health. And the way that I do it is in the middle of work, I will, when I don't have therapy that week, I would just basically dedicate time to dance, legit. I just go into my studio and just dance my heart out. And that somehow helps me, stay focused, because while I'm dancing, I'm actually thinking of things that I can do better, but in a different space. So that's one thing that I do. And then the other thing is that I make sure that I sleep as much as I can, which even till today, I fail at, because my son wakes up at 6, sometimes 7. But I make sure that I go to bed by 10 p.m. And try to get some sleep. So these are things that are, for me, it's actually really hard to do all these things because I have so much work to do. But after experiencing that, I just made a personal decision to make sure that, I even though I don't have the resources to go to therapy as much as I would like, but I'll make sure that I am taking care of my own mental health. And on the longevity side, I am passing legislation to make sure that every kid that is going to school, either that's from kindergarten all the way to high school, they're being taught of a psychology 101, where they can actually, get all the resources so that they can make the decision to do things that can help them and their mental health. And, just to be able to speak up, because when I was a kid, I was dealing with all of these mental illnesses to a point that I actually developed a stutter from a chronic stress. But even my environment, the adults in my space, no one, took time to basically tell me that, hey, this is not your fault. You were dealing with mental illnesses, and this is how you can get help. But I didn't have that as a kid. So I'm making sure that, as kids, as they're growing up, they have the resources to be able to, talk about their own, basically know what the heck is happening. Why am I acting this way? And, we actually just learned about something about depression in school, or anxiety in different curriculum stages, whether that's kindergarten, middle school. So I'm working with the public school as well to basically make sure that we're not adding more work onto their plate. So by creating a funding, from taxpayer funding to make sure that we're actually paying for those curriculum developers to come in. So I also brought in the University of Kansas Health System. So we're actually going to do a research around burnout and child mental health. So my man Cody is going to be one of the people on it. He had no idea, but here we are. But yeah, so yeah, so that's what I do, and I always try to think of my son now because I was that little kid that didn't have any resources. And the worst part is that I had no idea that I was dealing with mental illnesses because my childhood, whenever I saw someone with mental illnesses, is a guy in the corner of the street getting chased, and kids I was even making fun of him because I did not know that this guy was dealing with mental illnesses. So my goal for a longevity is to pass those legislations, and then also complemented with a licensing legislation where we're psychologists are not having to pay licensing in every state that they want to practice in. But we are making one license right now for Kansas and Missouri so that, we can have more kids going into that space as they grow up. They can start saying, hey, when I grow up, I want to become a psychologist. And with that, I'm going to implement the education side, the storytelling, by actually promoting that, with my own money. But yeah, so there's so much happening right now with the Freedom Project. So I think that's basically it.
So we're at time. I feel like we could talk about this a lot more. So I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds. Like, what's the one piece of advice you would give an entrepreneur right now related to this topic? Like, what's the one, I think we've given a little bit, but like, what's that one, you run into somebody, they say they've been, running into some challenges, some issues. What's the quick 30-second thing that you would tell people to be aware of or to do?
So I like to think I'm a good mom. I really do. When I started my practice, my son was 6 days old, and his first sentence to me was, "Mommy, no computer." And so I disconnected my internet and I made some changes. And I learned something that I think is true for all of us, and we don't always realize it, is that the loudest voices in your life demanding things, the people that are asking for the most, are usually not the people that need you the most. And the people that really care about you and the people that would be there for you no matter what, whether it's business or family or mental health or anything, they're probably not asking you for anything. They're probably just patiently waiting for you to have time. So stop whenever you're looking at your phone and your email and like answering all the stuff that people are demanding, and ask, who's not asking me for anything? Because I'm going to call that person right now. That's the person that actually is good for my mental health, because they're just patiently waiting for me to show up when I'm available. And if you do that, I think you'll be a little bit happier, because it's hard when you're busy. So you got to give your attention to the people that are actually just waiting for you to love them.
Yeah, that's good. I think the one thing that I'd say that it's probably, you could take, I'll have my business cards that have my cell phone on it. I don't believe in making general referrals. You need to know a person. It takes 20 seconds of courage for somebody to get help, 20 seconds of courage. And I can't tell you how many people we've lost because people didn't feel, because a symptom of their illness is that they didn't even have the energy to be able to ask for help. So if you recognize it, at least be educated enough to just ask. I think there's a new book out by Daniel Pink, I think it's called Regrets. And his podcast is so good about the one takeaway from that book is, when I now feel something in my gut, I'm going to ask, because people are waiting for me to ask, because by the time they need help, they're so zapped out. So know one person. I'll be your one person. I'd be glad I help people get connected all the time. My son also had some mental health challenges going through high school, and I work with psychiatrists and specialists, and I could call them at 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night and be like, is this real? Is this like normal teenage stuff, or is this something I got to be worried with? That saved a lot of long-term investment. So having somebody that you can reach out to, and then when you notice it, 20 seconds of courage, ask about it, because the worst you're going to hear is, oh no, dude, I'm just having a rough day. Or, if you hear somebody open up, then you have somewhere to be able to help them go. So do that one thing, and I think that would be the best advice I'd offer you.
Well, so with me, I always like to use my own experience, because I'm not a psychologist. Anything that I say should not be considered as an advice all the time. But, I actually forgot the question, so I was stalling.
What's the one piece of advice, the 30-second piece of advice you'd give to someone?
Yeah, so again, I always make sure that, when I don't have the resources, or when I feel like I always try to ignore how I feel sometimes because the voices are extremely loud in my head, which sometimes can like develop like insecurities because now I am doubting myself at the same time. So when I feel like I don't have the space to even talk to anybody, I'll just create the space by just telling my own story, or just sharing what I'm going through. So somehow that would, so the people that are actually wanting to help you, like you mentioned, they'll actually come out and like start talking to you. Hey, I'm actually worried about you. Is everything okay? Because I do have a tendency of just disappearing, like completely gone. I'll go to Utah and be in the mountains. But that's for my own mental well-being because I need that retreat because I'm reading so many emails about someone's very traumatic story. And sometimes I'm not mentally ready to even open that. But emails, it just pop up and I click it. And I was like, oh my God, okay, I need a break. The advice that I would give would be just have boundaries with the things that we do, and also make sure that we're not identifying with them. Because the moment you are identifying with the things that you do, that's when you start experiencing all these symptoms of mental illnesses. Because now you are making it your fault. You're saying, okay, well, this thing failed, so it's obviously my fault. So there's a lack of boundary. And yeah, so that's the only advice that I can give right now. So the more I study, the more research I do, I'll have more advice.
Well, I appreciate all of you being here tonight. I appreciate all of you sharing with the group. And I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing.